Okay, what if I told you we actually know the name of the world's very first author? I'm not talking about some ancient culture or civilization, but the actual name of the individual who first put their name to their work. It's a story that was completely lost for over 4,000 years.
So, who do you think it was? You might be thinking Homer, right? Or maybe one of the biblical prophets, an ancient philosopher? Well, the real answer is much, much older, and for millennia, it was literally buried under the sands of time.
Her name was Enheduanna, and we're talking way back, around 2300 BC in ancient Mesopotamia. She wasn't just anybody. She was a high priestess, a princess, and a poet, the very first person that we know of to ever attach their name to a piece of literature.
But wait a second, if she lived that long ago, how on earth do we even know she was real? Her story wasn't passed down from generation to generation. Nope, this is a story of rediscovery. It's kind of like finding a message in a bottle that's been floating around for thousands and thousands of years.
I mean, just try to wrap your head around the amount of time we're dealing with here. Enheduanna is living and writing these incredible hymns around 2300 BC. And then, poof, nothing. For over 4,000 years, her name is basically forgotten until modern archaeology brings her back into the light in 1927.
So, let's set the scene. The year is 1927. You've got this famous British archaeologist, Sir Leonard Woolley, and he's digging at the site of the ancient city of Ur, which, was a huge deal in Mesopotamian civilization. He's uncovering temples, palaces, the whole shebang.
And then, in the middle of all those ruins, his team finds this, a beautiful but shattered alabaster disc. Once they pieced it back together, though, the inscription on the back was just, wow, a total game changer. It had her name, Enheduanna, it named her super famous father, King Sargon, and it stated her official role as High Priestess. This was it, the smoking gun, physical proof she existed.
So, the disc proved she was a real person. But who was she? Well, get this, she wasn't some quiet scribe working in a dusty corner. Oh no, Enheduanna was an absolute powerhouse in her day.
So her dad? Just Sargon of Akkad. The guy who built the world's first empire, no big deal. He appointed her high priestess in the conquered city of Ur, which was actually a genius political move. It was a way to bring his people, the Akkadians, and the local Sumerians together culturally. And as the priestess, Enheduanna held an enormous amount of religious and political power. But her life wasn't all smooth sailing and unchallenged power. It seems a really dramatic turn of events is what actually inspired her most personal and most famous work. So things get messy. There's a lot of political chaos, and a rebel leader named Lugal-Enning takes over Ur. And who is his number one target? Yep, Enheduanna. She's the most visible symbol of her father's empire. So he kicks her out, strips her of all her titles, and sends her into exile.
And right there, at her absolute lowest point, this personal and political disaster, what does she do? She turns to her art. She composes the Exaltation of Inanna, this incredibly complex and passionate poem. And listen, this was not just some simple prayer. It was a brilliantly constructed argument designed to convince the goddess Inanna to step in and restore her to power.
So here you can kind of see the two sides of her plea. On one side, you have the cuneiform text itself. That's that cool wedge-shaped writing they used back then. And on the other, an image of the goddess Inanna, the powerful, warlike deity Enheduanna was speaking to directly, telling her own story and demanding divine justice.
It's an amazing story, right? But, and there's almost always a but in history, this leads us to a huge scholarly debate, a real ancient literary mystery. This is the million-dollar question for the experts, the Assyriologists. That disc proves she existed, for sure. But does it prove she was an author? Just how strong is the evidence?
Okay, so the debate really boils down to this. The case for her being the author is pretty compelling. I mean, the poems feature a really strong I voice, and she even names herself directly. Plus, the story in the poem perfectly matches what we know about her political exile. But the case against also has some solid points. The clay tablets we have today, they're actually copies made by scribes 6 centuries after she lived, and they're written in a later version of the language. So it's possible these scribes just added her legendary name to give the texts more authority.
Right, so the skeptical view is that maybe these later scribes, as part of their training, were just copying famous works. They might have taken an anonymous poem about exile and thought, hey, let's say the famous Enheduanna wrote this.
It would make it part of the grand legend of her father's dynasty. And honestly, it's a debate that's still going on today.
So whether she was the literal author or the powerful inspiration behind the poems, Enheduanna's legacy is absolutely undeniable. Let's dig into why she's still such an important figure for us today.
Well, for starters, she holds the title of the earliest named author in world history. That's a huge deal. Then, in the 1970s, she was rediscovered by feminist scholars who celebrated her as this rare and powerful female voice from the dawn of civilization. But her importance goes even deeper. Her use of a first-person voice, saying I Enheduanna, to describe her own suffering and desires to a god, was revolutionary. It's like a major shift in human consciousness, the first time we see an individual telling their own story to try and shape their own destiny.
Ultimately, Enheduanna's rediscovery is just such a powerful reminder. Her name, her face, and her words survived for 4 millennia, just waiting on a piece of stone in the dust of Iraq. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other voices, what other stories are still out there, just waiting for their own Sir Leonard Woolley to come along and find them?